Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Emil Robinson Smith will be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our Adam Bernstein is out in the field preparing to track the Falcon 9 rocket once it takes flight, do some still photography as well. Michael Caine has the morning off. That said, you can find the fellows over on their social channels on X, Adam Bernstein at ABurnNYC, Michael Caine at MD Caine Jr. You can find Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. We are on X as well as Facebook and Threads. We'll also have support for this morning's launch from our friends Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Taking a wide look at a dark pad here, just a little speck of light in the distance as SpaceX is preparing to launch its workhorse rocket, the Falcon 9, from Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. We are currently T-minus 56 minutes, 39 seconds, and counting from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. On board are a batch of 5 satellites for the Texas-based company called AST SpaceMobile. These satellites are the first of their series of commercial satellites following the launch of their test satellite called Blue Walker 3. This satellite constellation is designed to help provide cell coverage across the United States for those who may be in spots where cell service is a little bit harder to reach. Fairly large satellites, these ones are. They're about 693 square feet once they're deployed in their on-orbit configuration. However, the satellites will actually be getting a little bit bigger once AST SpaceMobile moves into its next block version of these satellites. These are considered Block 1. They're a little bit smaller, closer to the Blue Walker 3 size. And that's because of some supply chain issues and wanting to get these first satellites on orbit with a little more expediency as they work on their Block 2 versions. As we are kicking off our live coverage, I want to thank the little more than 400 of you who are joining with us live. I know it's a very wonky hour. Some of you may have been trying to stay up or getting up early in anticipation of the Polaris Dawn spacewalk, one of the highlights of that mission. And SpaceX has adjusted the timing of that. We'll talk a little bit more about Polaris Dawn in just a little bit, but appreciate you hopping over here with our live launch coverage. In the meantime, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. Allows more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage. I want to thank Callistia Lee, one of our wonderful channel members and moderators, for helping us out at this odd hour. Appreciate you being with us, helping to keep things kosher in the live chat. We're also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube, so thanks to folks like Clever Girl, Jeff Hansen, I Am Lita, Roddy Mom 12, KH, and many others for ongoing support with channel membership. Good morning to you, Bubba Ray. Patty Chichil. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop. That is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments from the Cape in 4K. Last but not least, if you have a comment or a question about this launch or other happenings in the realm of space, your comment or question is appropriate to be read on our show. You can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. I'd love to bring you into the conversation. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the count, but also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that is always greatly appreciated. Currently T minus 50 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. As SpaceX is aiming to launch this Falcon 9 rocket in the next 50 minutes and some change, they're once again facing some more proverbial than literal headwinds at the moment, as the launch weather forecast is less than optimal heading into this launch opportunity. There's a 4-hour launch window for SpaceX. However, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast just a 30% chance of favorable weather at liftoff, citing concerns with the cumulus cloud rule, the thick cloud layers rule, and the surface electric fields rule. These rules are in place in order to protect the rocket, its payload, and broader public safety. Rocket passing through notable clouds can cause essentially a static electricity effect, and the rocket can generate its own lightning, which of course would be quite dangerous for all parties involved. So meteorologists help to steer launch providers away from such potential risks. If SpaceX needs to pivot to a backup opportunity, they do have range availability 24 hours from now, roughly 24 hours from now, with a launch window that would open up on Friday, September 13th at 4:49 a.m. Eastern. If they do decide to push to that backup opportunity. The chance of good weather at this point in the outlook is about a coin toss, which I know doesn't sound great, but compared to today would be an improvement from a weather standpoint. That's not to say that SpaceX won't be able to thread the needle, as it were. They've found a way in various circumstances. So, of course, that's why we're live here covering this mission with you. And we'll, of course, let you know any relevant updates to the weather as we continue to roll on. And a welcome into, as she's now known, Aussie Space Girl, formerly Stephanie B, for those who know her by a previous handle. Good to see you this morning. As we are heading towards some of the first milestones in the countdown this morning, let's go ahead and take a look at the countdown timeline for the mission today. Let you know what we are anticipating from SpaceX as it continues on through the count. As is standard for non-crew related Falcon 9 launches, about T-minus 38 minutes from liftoff. The SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of propellant load. This is an electronic poll, so if SpaceX feels like they're in a good position to do so, they can take this poll a little bit early. Once the go-ahead is given, prop load begins with two events simultaneously. Rocket-grade kerosene, or RP-1, is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. At the 30-minute mark, cryogenic helium is loaded onto the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage as well. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same event will occur, but on the second stage, about 4 minutes later. About T-minus 23 minutes, the second stage kerosene tank is full. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. We know it, of course, when it manifests itself in the so-called big vent at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. It's the process where SpaceX is chilling the feed lines prior to second stage LOX load, which begins T-minus 16 minutes or thereabouts. At the 7-minute mark, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps and helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank is full. At T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the strong back, or the transporter erector, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, clears back in a much more rapid fashion to create space for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage, about a minute later. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. You should hear that call out as Falcon 9 being in startup. 45 seconds out, the SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin 1D engines are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff. Again, targeting the opening of a 4-hour window this morning, which is coming up at 4:52 a.m. Eastern. That's 08:52 UTC for our friends joining around the world. In other words, T-minus 42 minutes, 12 seconds. We are currently T-minus 39 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. Just about a minute away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director will need to make the call on the start of propellant load for this mission. Again, SpaceX does have multiple launch opportunities within this window as long as prop load has not begun. But once they start fueling the rocket, they are locking themselves into that launch attempt time. Currently T minus 37 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. Want to bring in an image here of what these satellites look like that are about to launch. These are the BlueBird 1 through 5 satellites stacked in their launch configuration. As we are coming into potentially the start of fueling here. SpaceX will be deploying these 5 satellites over the course of several minutes once the deployment period starts. That's going to be coming up. T plus 53 minutes, 57 seconds is when the first of these satellites deploys. The deployment sequence lasts until T plus 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 53 seconds. Again, these are the first of AST SpaceMobile's commercial satellites called BlueBirds. These are the Block 1 version. Block 2 going to be a little bit bigger than the ones you see here. Once they're in their on-orbit configuration, they will have communications arrays that extend to 693 square feet. But the Block 2 satellites, once they're in an on-orbit configuration, will be 2,400 square feet. This point in the countdown, we're T minus 33 minutes. SpaceX will have needed to have started fueling if they're going to target the opening of the window here. What we're looking for near the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, if you look just above the tree line, you see that slightly lighter band near the bottom of the first stage. That's about where we usually start to see a little bit of vapor form as the super cold densified liquid oxygen starts flowing on the first stage. And it does look like we do have a little bit of vapor forming there, which certainly indicates that SpaceX is in the fueling process on its Falcon 9 rocket, which means it's going to give the opening of the window the old college try. Yeah, definitely seeing some good signs of fueling at this point. So SpaceX now keying into that first launch opportunity again that's coming up T minus, or excuse me, at 4:52 a.m. Eastern, 08:52 UTC. And that is in T minus 31 minutes, 27 seconds, and counting. Of course, as SpaceX is preparing to launch this mission, it is also getting ready to step into flight day 3 for the Polaris Dawn mission. After busy flight day 2, a bit of history set with the Polaris Dawn mission so far, and more to come. During flight day 2, they increased their apogee of the Dragon spacecraft to more than 1,400 kilometers. It's the furthest humans have traveled since the end of the Apollo program back in 1972. Also noteworthy that two of SpaceX's employees, Anna Menon, Sarah Gillis, entered into the history books as the two women who have traveled furthest from Earth so far in history. And of course, today they are very much preparing to step into another bit of history with the first commercial spacewalk, or EVA, that's coming up in the next a little bit more than an hour from now. That EVA is set to begin at 5:58 a.m. Eastern, 09:58 UTC, with live coverage beginning just about an hour prior to that. We'll start to see the preparations for that, what SpaceX and the Polaris program have been doing to get ready for that. And of course, we'll also be having our own live coverage talking about how we got to this point in the mission and what's coming down the pike for all of the Polaris crew. Mission Commander Jared Isaacman and Mission Specialist Sarah Gillis will be the ones who will physically exit the vehicle one at a time. But the whole vehicle will be brought down to vacuum since there's no airlock within the Dragon capsule. Weather currently remains green for launch with this mission today. Back here on the ground with the AST mobiles, BlueBird 1 through 5. Currently T minus 26 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. At this point, the cryogenic helium has started loading on board both the Falcon 9's first and second stage pressure vessels. I want to briefly talk about where this Falcon 9 is going to be launching to and landing once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Falcon 9, of course, lifting off from Space Launch Complex 40 or Slick 40, the workhorse launch pad for SpaceX here in Cape Canaveral. Once it departs, it'll be heading in a northeasterly trajectory with, as you can see from the red line, the first stage booster B-1078, the SpaceX fleet, going to be making an RTLS, or return to landing site landing, over at LZ1, landing zone 1. Payload fairings encapsulating the 5 BlueBird satellites will also be recovered on a SpaceX recovery vessel. SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery effort, and they're working on getting their fairing halves and boosters certified for up to 40 flights. So it's important that they work to recover as much of the vehicle as possible with this and other future missions. As we're continuing the count, want to listen to some commentary from the CEO of AST Mobile. Let's go and listen to that as they're
honor to having you all waking up this early to see this together with us. My engineers are around. We're going to leave after we lose sight of the satellites, and hopefully you will stay and see the remaining of the mission. Again, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
we were just catching the tail end of the comments from the CEO of AST Mobile, SpaceMobile, excuse me. We'll be monitoring their live feed to see if any other dignitaries from the company are going to be speaking in between now and then, or if there's some good B-roll to share with you of the satellites that are going to be launching in the next 23 minutes. Speaking of that, at this point, the second stage kerosene tank should be full just about now. Coming up on the so-called big vent as well in the next couple of minutes as they begin the chill down of the feed lines before a second stage liquid oxygen load. Those with AST SpaceMobile are watching this launch and discussing the mission over at the Saturn V Center, part of the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. Those are the views you saw just a moment or two ago. The chill down sequence will have started now, and we're just waiting on the start of the so-called big vent, which is beginning in the next 10 seconds. And there it goes. Good visual indication that fueling is, in fact, moving along on time and on schedule. Now T-minus 16 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. We're just coming upon the end of this big vent here. As you can see, it's starting to peter off. It'll set up second stage liquid oxygen load coming up in the next 30 seconds. As we continue to step on through the counts, certainly want to thank the more than 1,700 of you who are either have stayed up late with us or are getting up early, whatever the case may be. Appreciate you being here with us. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, allow some more folks to find their way into our live coverage. We very much appreciate it. Currently T-minus 14 minutes and counting. The Falcon 9 first stage booster that's flying today's mission, tail number 1078 in the SpaceX fleet, is going for its 13th flight today. So before it takes off for that mission, let's go ahead and take a step back in time and talk about how we got here, some of its previous flights. Began launching in March of 2023 with the Crew 6 mission heading up to the International Space Station with a Crew Dragon spacecraft. That was followed by the launch of a pair of satellites for SES, the O3B mPOWER 3 and 4 mission on April 28th, 2023. Headed over into Starlink land for a little while with the launches of Starlink 6-4 on June 4th, 6-8 on August 7th, 6-16 on September 16th, 6-31 on December 3rd. And we move on to the USSF 124 mission that launched on Valentine's Day of this year. And then we're back to Starlink territory. Starlink 6-46 on March 25th. Starlink 6-53 on April 23rd. Starlink 6-60 on May 28th. Starlink 10-2 on June 23rd. And Starlink 10-6 on August 2nd. That, of course, brings us into today with this pending launch of the BlueBird 1-5 mission with these Block 1 satellites. Now getting some live pad views from SpaceX here as the countdown continues on. A little bit of housekeeping here. Want to note that the SpaceX feed, you can see a little bit of a difference in time between what's in our countdown clock and what's in the SpaceX feed. Difference is our countdown clock is in real time. What's coming through from SpaceX is on a slight delay. So you'll be making calls based off of our cameras, as you can see from SpaceX. Again, this is a launch for AST SpaceMobile, and there are 5 BlueBird satellites on board. What you're seeing here is a promo video from AST SpaceMobile, giving you a visual representation of how it intends for its satellites to help provide connectivity for cell users in really any part of the country using these BlueBird satellites. The benefit that this particular company is boasting is that its service will be compatible with any cell phone in an unmodified sense. There's a rendering of what those satellites look like when they're in their on-orbit configuration, and a smash cut of the manufacturing process. Now T minus 8 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. You're seeing some graphical representation of the AST SpaceMobile's satellites here. We are just about a minute away from the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines from beginning. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. Helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. Now T minus 6 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. About 2 minutes away from the strong back retract sequence here. So far, all moving nominally with the fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket. Do a call out that the Falcon 9 is preparing for that strong back retract. Also want to let you know a bit of housekeeping as well as we're coming up on 4:50 here on the East Coast. Of course, this is nearing the beginning of our coverage as well for the Polaris Dawn spacewalk. So we will be having a dedicated stream on that mission as well. So it's going to be a little bit of a juggle here. See the clamp arms underneath the payload fairing starting to open up. The strong back will be reclining about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket momentarily. Essentially, what's going to happen is we are going to toggle back and forth between the events of both the AST SpaceMobile BlueBird 1-5 mission, as well as bringing you updates on the spacewalk. And eventually we will be pivoting towards the spacewalk, since that event obviously will last significantly longer than the duration of the deployment for the BlueBird 1-5 mission. Of course, this is a bit complicated on the back end, so please bear with us if we should run into any technical issues, but we're working behind the scenes to help make it as smooth of a transition as possible and bring you robust live coverage on both the Falcon 9 flight, which is now less than 3 minutes away, as well as the upcoming spacewalk, set to make history as the first EVA without a government involved. We're now T-minus 2 minutes, 33 seconds and counting from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. Falcon 9's first stage is now fully loaded with 1 million with liquid oxygen. They should be done with fueling the second stage in just a few seconds from now. You hear the call for stage 2 lock load complete. At this point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. You're seeing the ground gas closeouts here as we're just about a minute and a half away from planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. Want to welcome in a couple of new channel members here. Tripemin 3, welcome, the mission specialist level. And United Nations Space Command, marking 13 months with us. Good timing as this Falcon 9 first stage booster is preparing to make its 13th launch in just over a minute. And a thanks to Neo Janina 2024 for a $1 super chat. Appreciate all of you. Falcon 9 is in startup now. We are awaiting the call for the SpaceX launch director's go for launch. Got that go for launch call. We are now 30 seconds away from liftoff. $20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the BlueBird 1-5 mission for AST SpaceMobile. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower and is soaring above the skies over Florida's Space Coast. First stage makes its way back towards LZ1 or landing zone 1. T+2 minutes first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO. That'll be followed seconds later by stage separation. The first stage booster will perform a flip maneuver. The second stage engine will ignite at T plus 2 minutes and 29 seconds. The boost back burn will begin a few seconds after that. The fairing halves will separate from the second stage, T plus 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Boost back burn will conclude at 3.5 minutes. Coming up on MECO in about 5 seconds. And we have MECO. Stage separation. Ignition of that Merlin. Starting that flip maneuver, and the boost back burn is underway. Got a great view of that from our friend Chuck and Jen Briggs, excuse me. A little bit of a jellyfish effect, which is great to see, a little nebula. This boost back burn will last just a little bit under a minute. You can see just beyond the Merlin vacuum engine in the big box here. Just see the first stage booster for just a minute or two. Do have a call that the fairings have deployed. It's a brief view of the BlueBird satellites. SpaceX is using the recovery vessel Go Cosmos to recover the fairing halves. Now a little more than 4 minutes into flight. Coming up next will be the first stage entry burn beginning. Coming up at T plus 6 minutes and 4 seconds. Fairly brief entry burn, lasting just 13 seconds. Now T plus 5 minutes, 8 seconds. The entry burn coming up now less than a minute away. Getting some good views of the Merlin vacuum engine on the Falcon 9's upper stage, which provides about 220,500 pounds of thrust. Again, the first stage booster is going to be landing on landing zone 1 back at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So no drone ship in use today for this mission. And for those in Central Florida, just be aware you may hear a sonic boom as it comes back through the atmosphere. And there you can see the start of that entry burn. Again, just lasting about 13 seconds, so it is come and gone. Seeing it now in the SpaceX feed. Coming up next in now just about 20, 30 seconds will be the first stage landing burn beginning. Starting to see some views of LZ1. There's the landing burn in real time. It's coming from Pete Carson's. And a good touchdown of the booster. Seeing it now in the SpaceX video. And for a 13th time, we have a good landing of booster B1078. Call out for Seco 1. Air powering down the Merlin vacuum engine on the Falcon 9's upper stage. Falcon 9 upper stage now heading into that transfer orbit as there's just one burn prior to the deployment of the BlueBird satellites. It will remain in this coast phase until T plus 53 minutes and 57 seconds when the deployment sequence will begin. Again, this is a very busy morning for us here at Spaceflight Now as we're also beginning our coverage momentarily on the spacewalk of the Polaris Dawn mission. And for those who may just be joining us in now on our dedicated live stream for the Polaris Dawn spacewalk, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. You're watching two simultaneous SpaceX events happening on orbit right now. On the left, we are monitoring the progress of the first commercial spacewalk being done from a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft. Getting an overview of the crew right now and taking a look at the profile of mission pilot Scott Kidd Poteet, veteran of the U.S. Air Force with more than 20 years in the service, and an avid pilot in his own right, and also a colleague of Mission Commander Jared Isaacman at his company Shift 4 Payments. Sarah Gillis is a mission specialist on this mission and is also a SpaceX engineer, one of the two SpaceX employees who are flying on board this mission, in addition to Anna Menon. Sarah Gillis, along with Jared Isaacman, will be exiting the Dragon vehicle during the spacewalk this morning. However, because the Dragon spacecraft doesn't have an airlock, the entire vehicle will be brought down to vacuum. And so all four of the crew members will be fully donning their EVA suits designed by SpaceX. Finally, we have Anna Menon here, mission specialist and medical officer for the Polaris Dawn mission. Also a SpaceX engineer, also has the call sign of Walker. Grew up in Houston, Texas, and was a biomedical flight controller for NASA before making her way over to SpaceX, where she's been on console for multiple crew missions, including Demo 2, Crews 1 through 4, as well as the AX-1 mission for Axiom Space. If you're joining us through our dedicated live stream on the Polaris Dawn spacewalk, you may be wondering about the box to your right. That is the telemetry data from the mission for AST SpaceMobile. At this time, we're going to wrap up our dedicated stream over on the AST SpaceMobile live stream. We're going to continue tracking that mission, of course, as that progresses, and assuming good ground connection and something excessively active is not happening with the spacewalk at that time, we'll be sure to bring you the deployment of those 5 satellites. But for now, we're going to sign off on that. So for all of you that are watching over on that, we're going to move you over to our Polaris Dawn live coverage in the next moment or two. Want to very briefly thank a few folks for your support, though. Thanks to that blonde space girl with a $5 super chat. A welcome aboard to Stigen Debouchier. Apologies if I just completely butchered your name, but thanks for joining us at the channel membership at the pad leader level. A welcome aboard to Kel. T. McGee gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Appreciate that. And well-reasoned Superhawk marking 10 months as a channel member, saying, awesome coverage as always, Spaceflight Now team and mods. Thank you. And with that, we are going to wrap up our dedicated live coverage on the mission for AST SpaceMobile. Again, we'll continue to monitor that progress and bring you updates over on the Polaris Dawn stream. So rest assured, we are keeping track of that as we move forward.